Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about WandaVision, and yes, I'm talking about the entire series, not just the season finale. And it's just a lot right now, you know? This show, man. This show. Okay, sorry. First, I'll start off by saying this show is not perfect by any means. It's not Breaking Bad, but it's not trying to be. So anyone who's trying to put this show on a certain pedestal is trying to compare it to other shows. Please don't do that. See it as what it is, which is a Marvel TV show that takes place in the universe of the MCU, which is Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, think of it in that kind of lens and then just say, hey, what did this do to add to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? What did this do to add to the storytelling? And that's where your focuses should lie. And so I looked at it through that lens because I am a hard person to please. I can't even please myself. Don't go there. Don't do it. That's not what I meant. You know that's not what I meant. What I'm trying to say is I'm a hard person to please, and a lot of the times I'll find little things in a movie or in a television show and I'm just like, you know, that kind of didn't work for me, so now my opinion of this has changed. I'm a very picky person, and so when something is really good and when it stands out, it's really good. For me, at least. So that being said, WandaVision had moments in it that were just so game-changing in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how they do storytelling and how they do dialogue and writing. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany are such essential pieces of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which if you watched Avengers Endgame or Infinity War or all the movies kind of leading up after Age of Ultron, you were looking at them, you're like, I don't really believe their relationship. You could kind of put the pieces together, and if you had the context of the comic books, it was a lot easier to believe the romance. But for a lot of people who just watched the movies, you were probably thinking, I don't find this believable, but I get what they're trying to do. It's to service the plot and to service how tragic it's going to be when he gets that stone ripped out of his head, you know? So for those people, this was that supplemental series that they were needing. And for myself, it just felt like, hey, I have the comic book context, I understand the romance, I understand the relationship through that, but this took it to another level that I was not expecting. I was expecting them to flesh out these characters, but I wasn't expecting them to be so mature in how they did it. And the writing between these two characters specifically is phenomenal. And I mean, it is some of the best dialogue that we've gotten. And it's mostly coming from Vision in terms of the dialogue, but in terms of a performance and in terms of getting that emotional rawness, you know, that is all coming from Elizabeth Olsen in the show. And just because Vision is a robot or a synthezoid, I said it, doesn't mean he can't emote. Vision has always been this sort of beacon of light to Wanda, and that is shown so well in this show. Elizabeth Olsen is just a powerhouse performer in this, and there's just no topping what she's done here in terms of any other actress in the MCU. I mean, we haven't got to see Black Widow's movie, so maybe I'll give her the benefit of the doubt because maybe we were supposed to see something crazy from her. But other than that, I think Scarlet Witch is the most compelling character that the MCU has to offer, period. This show went so deep into diving into who she is, what she's lost, and how she's dealt with that grief. And it's just such an interesting take that the MCU has done with this. In terms of the emotion and in terms of their relationship, I will say though that there are some things outside of that relationship in this show that I could have done without, but I'm not mad that they're there. But before I get into that, I'll give credit to some of the things I really loved about the show was that they took these sitcoms that they were basing some of these episodes off of very seriously, and I love the way that they just portrayed everything to a T. I love the amount of attention to detail that they had for the Dick Van Dyke Show, Bewitched, Full House, Modern Family, Malcolm in the Middle, all those homages and not really nods, but just straight just taking that and then putting it in a modern lens. Everything that they did with that was phenomenal, and it was really compelling when they had those dark undertones in those episodes, but I will say that they were a little bit few and far between. I wish they embellished on more of the mystery and kind of the dark undertones of some of the episodes, because I feel like every episode in the first half of the season felt like it was saying, hey, we got something dark going on here. What? You want to find out? You're gonna have to wait a week. And that for me was like blue balls, you know? Not that I can't wait a week, because I grew up on television that, you know, you'd have to wait for episodes to come out on a weekly basis. But for a show like this, it was hard. Okay, I'll say it. It was hard. But I was waiting for it, and I was talking about it, and that's the thing I really like about this show, is that it's a show that kept you interested. Even though those first 2 episodes, I understand a lot of people fell off of it because, you know, it was leaning very heavy into those sitcoms where it was just like, whoa, what am I supposed to latch on to here? How does this connect to the MCU in any way? How does this connect to a bigger story? I understood that, but for me, I was just enjoying it, and I was just like, I like that they're building up to it slowly. I like that they're taking their time, and I had a lot of respect for the restraint that they had. And also, I just really like seeing these set pieces. It was just really fun for me overall. But I do understand why some people were not interested in those first couple of episodes. I get it. I think if they just leaned into the dark undertones just a little bit more, some of those subtle, mysterious, you know, stings that they had, and some of the times where the reality just broke and they would just pause and they would say, hey, do you want me to do that again? Or if there was something calling out on the radio, those things were really interesting to me, even though there were just so many fan theories going around, and I think it's a mistake on my part that I was actually kind of looking at them just ahead of time, just because I like hearing people talk about these things. But that's my fault. But just because of that, I was like, okay, I think I know what they're trying to set up here. So, okay, and then there's no real mystery. So, like I said, that's my fault for digging a little bit too deep. Other than that, like, I don't have a lot to complain about when it comes to their homages to sitcoms and what they were trying to accomplish there. The attention to detail and all of that was great, but like I said, there were some problems that I had. But for the most part, I think that the finale was where they really put a lot of their money into the special effects, and I guess I'm kind of skipping from the beginning all the way to the end, but I'll tie it together somehow. But what I'm saying is that the ending of the show really felt like them leaning really heavy into what the MCU is kind of known for, which is that, you know, that final act, big finale, that big CGI fest. And I don't have a problem with that in most movies or in most shows. I get that people want some kind of payoff. But for me, I will take an emotional payoff way more than just an adrenaline rush. You know, I like to see some people break down. I like to see some people get emotionally broken down. I like to see people change in a way. And I like a finale that makes a huge decision that makes me feel like, you know, what's going to happen next. And they did that, but I feel like they didn't need to go so heavy into the fight. And I feel like that budget could have been evenly dispersed throughout the episodes. And I think if they allowed enough time for each of these episodes, then maybe they would have allowed enough time to embellish on these things that I really wanted to see from the show. I personally loved how much Elizabeth Olsen had poured into this role, and the fact that she got this payoff was incredibly satisfying. And the fact that there was that scene where she's just breaking down after seeing Vision's little note with the heart in it. She goes to New Jersey of all places. I don't know why Vision went to New Jersey. That baffles me that he chose that place. That town looked depressing, in my opinion. I was like, I don't know. Vision has a very bad taste in finding neighborhoods. But other than that, it was a very touching moment when she finally goes to that house after Agatha is showing all these little pieces of her life that kind of led up to her blowing up, literally just blowing up and transforming the town just out of this emotional swell inside of her, because she's finally hit her breaking point, and it's just so emotionally impactful. But no, it doesn't stop there. It just keeps going. And I'm like, please stop. My heart can only take so much. But it's like, no, we're not done with you yet. And it keeps going, and then boom, they're in the house. And you see some little figure from across Wanda, and it's starting to form. And we all know it's going to be Vision. But we're just sitting there in anticipation. And we see them, and they face each other. And then everything is black and white. And that confrontation between them. And then Vision opens his damn pretty mouth, and he says those words. And you're just like, I am in so much love with this couple. Like, I want them to succeed. I want them to be happy. I want them to be together again. But that's what the show does great, is it knows they can't have a happy ending, because Wanda has gone so far, and she's transformed a town. She's literally become the villain to these people, and she doesn't even know how she did it, but she can't help but be living inside of it, because it's the only place that she's found happiness after all this tragedy. and it's such compelling writing, and it's such a great direction that they did. I did read Tom King's Vision, and there are so many things in that comic book that feel like pieces for what created the show, but done in the opposite direction, if that makes any sense. Like, it feels like some characters were swapped for other characters, and little pieces of that Tom King run were integrated in this show, but made much more emotionally relevant to Wanda's story. And that's great. I love that. But enough about Wanda, but we'll get back to Wanda. But Vision, played by Paul Bettany, is phenomenal in this show. I mean, he gets some of the best lines. I mean, if this guy showed up to me at a bar and he said, "What is grief, if not love persevering?" I would drop my panties. I would buy panties just so I could drop them. That line is just phenomenal. And I was like, there's no way this motherfucker can beat that line. And you know what he does? You know what he fucking does? He duets with Wanda at the end. You know what he says? "We have said goodbye before, so it stands to reason." And then she cuts in. Don't do it, Brandon. Be strong. "We'll say hello again." God damn it! Who is writing this shit? It's so good, guys. The writing between these two characters when they are together, it's phenomenal. I mean, the amount of attention that they went into making these two the most romantic couple since the Before trilogy. It's crazy what they did with these two characters for an MCU show. I have not seen romantic chemistry between two characters. Actually, I just haven't seen romantic chemistry between two characters like this in a comic book movie ever. And I'm not saying that this is the best romantic chemistry in film ever. I'm saying I'm very impressed for the scope of what the MCU is trying to do and how they're trying to take it into a more mature direction. And I love that. And the thing I love about Vision in the show is he's starting to see the real reality seep in, but Wanda is preventing him from accessing that. Even though she doesn't quite know what's going on, she's still trying to keep things in order in some way. But she also knows that Vision is, he's a person at this point. He's someone who has his own consciousness, and he's going to explore. And that's the thing that I really like about the show, is that it explores both sides of what's happening. And is what Wanda doing evil necessarily? Is she becoming the villain of this show? Is she becoming the villain of the MCU? Is that what they're establishing? Or is she just someone who is dealing with grief in her own way, but it's also being harmful because it's so powerful, the methods that she's choosing? And it's such a compelling way to write these characters, because you immediately feel for this person. Because how can you be mad at someone who's lost everything in their life and all she wants is to keep some shred of a reality where there is no harm, that there is no evil, Like, of course you would want to just latch onto these sitcoms. And that's the thing that I'll jump into next, is that one episode, I think it was episode 7 or 8, I want to say it's 7, where Agatha is showing Wanda pieces of her past that have built up to that moment. And we get to see that confrontation between her and her memories. And it's so great. That line, obviously, with Vision, but we also get to see why Wanda is who she is, why these abilities have always been within her, and why this grief has always followed her around, because she, at no point in her life, has ever let go of those things after they happened. They've always been a part of her. And that's the thing that the Marvel movies kind of forget. They kind of bring her up in these movies to be the big badass, to kind of face these big villains, to be like, whoa, look at the light show she's doing. That's crazy. And that's pretty much it. But there's little moments, between her and Vision, where Vision sort of grounds her. He's always been that beacon of light. I mean, you look at Civil War in that kitchen scene, and there's just this shred of humanity that he's showing to her, and that little hand that he's just putting out for her, because he knows that she's hurting. But he's also there to serve as a function in that movie, to serve as sort of her bodyguard, to keep her there imprisoned, I guess. And so it's that duality that we got to face within Vision, where he knows that he is someone who has to stand in the way and do the right thing, but he also loves this person. And we get to see that in the show too, because he's an honorable person. He wants to help people out, but he's conflicted because the woman he loves is trying to keep him around, but he also doesn't remember anything that happened prior to them coming to Westview. And so there's just so many pieces of the puzzle that they're laying out in this show, and the fact that they accomplished what they did, it's It's phenomenal. It's a feat. But I will say I wanted more of that, and maybe I'm just being greedy, but that's the part of the show that I love. At this point, it sounds like I'm mostly talking about the season finale, which I sort of am, because it does sort of tie everything together, and it is sort of that payoff between Vision and Wanda that if it just ended here, I think I would be satisfied. But I also really, really want them to be back together, and I think that just goes to how well written these two are. But stop me from saying how well written they are, but they are. But I'll just mention one more scene, guys. The scene between Vision and Wanda at the end, when the reality is closing in and the children have gone to sleep and they are obviously going to be swept away by the reality that's coming in, and it's just Wanda and Vision downstairs in the living room, and she knows everything is going to close in on itself and everything is going to flash back to daylight and there's going to be nothing there. And so she turns off one light and the whole room is black. And then we see a light right behind her. And guess who it is? Of course, it's Vision. And he turns on the light because what has he always been in Wanda's life but the light, the beacon of light in her life, the one little shred of hope in humanity that she had. And it's so beautifully done. And he says this little line where it's like, someone told me that you shouldn't something in the dark. And she's like, that's a lie. You're just making that up. And I'm just like, this is so great. This dialogue is just so great. It says everything about Vision, who he is. He's willing, by all sense of logic or whatever, he's willing to throw that out just to make her feel some sort of comfort and to also just show her that, you don't have to hide behind what's going to happen. This is the truth. This is the reality. Let's face it together. I'm going to disappear and you are going to have to live without me. But who knows where we go from here. And then we get that line that I mentioned earlier that just, Jesus Christ. God. Jesus. Man. Then we get that line, that finisher, that 1-2 punch between the two. And then Vision fades away. And, oh man. Then he says, so long, darling, as he's fading away. Like he's getting Thanos in like the most beautiful way. He just disappears, and then all we have is Wanda, and then daylight. We're back in Westview as it was, and there's this empty lot. And for some reason, we look at her face, and it's just complete clarity. It's like she knows that she has these abilities. She knows what she lost, but I think she's ready to sort of move on. And that's something that's really mature about the show. She didn't break down and cry again. She didn't go in the direction where it's like, oh, I'm going to go crazy and now I'm going to be evil. Maybe she will, but the way that they set it up, it's that send-off that Vision gave her, that sort of, this is something that we're going to handle together, and we might see each other again, we might not, but just know, I'll always be a part of you, and etc. And then people are crying. People... Not me. I'm not people. God, fuck, who's cutting onions in here? Jesus Christ. How can Vision be sexy and sad at the same time? I mean, choose one. God damn it. Anyways, overall, the way that they wrapped it up between those two characters really sewed up those negative thoughts that I had about some of the episodes, especially in the last episode. I think that all the good that they did in that last episode overshadowed all the things I didn't really like. Like, I didn't really need that sky beam that Scarlet Witch shot up in the sky that we've seen in so many of the Marvel movies. I didn't really need the light show up in the air or that big battle, but I did also like how she kind of turned that around and she started to use the runes to her advantage that Agatha showed her how to use. I really like that, but I also didn't need the big spectacle of it all. I didn't need that, but they did it and I know why they did it. I feel like one of the letdowns of that big fight was just that I think it made Agatha sort of a weaker villain in a lot of ways because it just became this light show and I'm going to be the vampire that sucks out all of your magical abilities, and she became just this glorified vacuum at the end of it. And I was just like, I found the Agatha a lot more interesting that was sort of building up and revealing some of Wanda's weaknesses. I really like that. I like that she was more of a psychological villain up to that point. I will say, I really like how they handled Agatha towards the end, and then she becomes Agnes. Like, I thought that was very appropriate. That's a way to kind of not kill the villain off and keep them open for any future movies or whatever shows that they want to do. And I really like that. And I also like the fact that, in the comic books, Agatha isn't necessarily a chaotic evil. She's more of just kind of like some passive evil person. She has these abilities, but she's actually more of a glorified babysitter for a lot of the characters in the Marvel comic book universe. And so she has these abilities. She's a witch, and she's sort of the tutor. Why did I say tutor? Weird. She's sort of a tutor or a mentor for Scarlet Witch in the comics. So that part, I wonder if they're gonna actually bring her back in the future and say, hey, we're setting her up to be a teacher. That she's probably gonna take off, whatever spell that she put on her, and then say, hey, teach me how to do this. Even though at the end of this last episode, they kind of set up that, Wanda seems to be doing pretty good. She can astral project herself and, make a cup of coffee at the same time. Like, she's doing fine. So maybe she doesn't need Agnes or Agatha. So I don't know. I don't know how they're going to piece that together, but I like that they didn't kill her off and just like blow her up and say, well, we're done there. Like, I'm really glad they kept Kathryn Hahn, because she was actually one of the more entertaining parts of some of the earlier episodes, and I really liked what they did with her in the second to last episode. I just feel like they kind of dropped the ball with her in this very last episode, and then sort of redeemed her towards the end, if that makes sense. So yeah, wow. Long-winded way to say I like Kathryn Hahn. She's great. And the more I'm starting to talk about it, it sounds like I don't have a lot of negatives about the show. And maybe I don't, now that I think about it, because I'll talk about a couple more things that I actually liked. And there are two people specifically, which are Kat Dennings and the addition of Randall Park. Well, that's not their character's name. It's Jimmy Woo and it's Darcy. But the fact that they brought those characters back, we know Randall Park, God damn it, we know Jimmy Woo from Ant-Man and the Wasp, and we know Darcy from the Thor movies, and they sort of redeemed Darcy's character in a very good way. They made her someone that was just useful and not just quippy and just annoying. They actually gave her some use, and they sort of made her a veteran in the superhero world. She understands like the superpowered people, and she understands where they're coming from. She understands that they are people at their core, and that was a really interesting angle because she feels some empathy for Wanda and she wants to help, and that made her drive, her motivation, a lot more interesting, especially the way she kind of bounced off Jimmy Woo. And I don't know why I'm not mentioning Monica Rambeau in this. She's actually kind of completes that trio. So sorry. Monica Rambeau was also a really great addition, and I kind of liked how they introduced Photon in there. Her character was great. I really liked how she was always trying to talk Wanda down. I like how she was sort of the moral compass for that, and she was sort of that bridge between the two. Like, literally, she became like a bridge between the two worlds, and she was the only one that was really crossing over between the reality of Westview and the rest of New Jersey. And so that was really cool, and I liked how she was always fighting up against Director Dick, or whatever his face is. I don't even remember his name. But yeah, I really liked her character, and I really liked how they made Captain Marvel much more interesting, because we got such a cool character out of that series, even though she's played by a completely different actress. So a lot of credit to her. But anyways, back to Jimmy Woo, played by Randall Park. I am personally just so glad that there is this newfound love for Randall Park, and I am so happy that he's getting the attention he deserves. This man is hilarious, and not only that, but I feel like he's filling that Coulson-shaped hole that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was missing, that little piece of humanity that added humor, but also some sort of authority. It's just, he's just perfect. And I love that they showed the little magic trick. I love that little character arc that he got between Ant-Man and the Wasp in the show. So perfect. Jimmy Woo is just such a fun character to have in the show, and I think he bounces so well off of the more human characters in the show, and he adds some sort of levity to every situation, and the way that he has this deadpan delivery sometimes, it's just so delicious. And and if you haven't seen him from his best work personally, his KY jelly commercial, then you're missing out. Okay, yeah, I'll mention. He was also Jim on The Office, or Asian Jim. Yeah, everyone keeps mentioning Asian Jim. He was Asian Jim for like one episode. He doesn't even remember that. Here, I'll put a clip of him saying that.
Many years ago, it was the final season of The Office. Mm-hmm. I got the chance to play a character named Asian Jim in in like one scene during the final season, and at that point the popularity of the show had been waning, and I was in and out in an hour, and I thought that was really fun, and then I completely forgot about it, and then several years later, I'm like walking down the street and this car drives by and a guy yells like, "Asian Jim!" and drives off. And I'm thinking like, is this some like racist thing that I don't know about?
Yeah. All that being said, gushing about these side characters, that kind of leads me into one of the biggest things about the show that I was very conflicted on. It did such a great job of establishing S.W.O.R.D. in this universe and saying, hey, you're going to see a lot more of us in the future, but it also did sort of take away from some of the moments that I really liked about the show. That being Vision and Wanda. Anytime that we had Vision and Wanda in a scene together, it would cut back to S.W.O.R.D. and see what's happening on the other side of the hex or the bubble. And anytime I did that, I sort of was not as invested. I did really like that they had, Monica Rambeau, Jimmy Woo, and Darcy all kind of working together to get access to Wanda. That was interesting. But then everything else, I was just like, why is this really here? And I'm really hoping that they tie this all up in the end, which they sort of try to do with White Vision. But then after that, it's just sort of ends unsatisfyingly. It's just, you see Director Dick just get arrested and then taken away, and that's pretty much the end of it. And it felt like a very big buildup for little to nothing at all. And White Vision just shoots up out of the sky and he, goes to space or something like Poochie.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
And I don't know. They're setting that up for future movies. And that's where the big complaint comes from, which is I feel like S.W.O.R.D. was introduced just to say, hey, we're connected to this, and we're going to be connected to a lot more, and we'll see you in the next one. And I'm like, yeah, but how does this really play into the overall story? I know that Wanda has to have some conflict from the outside. She has to know that what she's doing is wrong. She has to break her reality. But I feel like that's kind of what Agatha should have served the main purpose for. Just kind of be this menacing undertone character where you feel like she has this facade of niceness, but you know that there's something dark lurking underneath. I think she sort of served that role on her own, and we didn't really need Director Dick in the way. But it hurts because you would also need to have Monica Rambeau, Jimmy Woo, and Darcy in the show because I think they were such great additions. So if there was a way that we could have them in the show or just focus on those three rather than, all of S.W.O.R.D., then I think I really would have appreciated it. But I really feel like they were just sort of cannon fodder for the series. I feel like, they were sort of a joke and I couldn't really take them seriously as an authority. And I felt like they were sort of unnecessary to the entire story. So they served their purpose, but were they essential? Not really. But that's just a sort of minor complaint I had. I did like that, they introduced these characters that I really like, so that's all I'll say about that. And now that I mentioned White Vision, that was one of the things about the season finale. Guess I'm talking a lot about the season finale, but what I really liked about that last big spectacle was White Vision and I guess we'll call them non-Vision fighting at the end, and I really liked the way that they used their abilities and powers to sort of fight each other because they could match each other so well because they're literally each other. The way that they played with density and phasing through each other and kind of just using that to their own advantage, that was really fun. And I think that they used the appropriate amount of time to show that fight because I love this. They used a paradox or logic to solve that fight. It was fantastic. I haven't seen a fight handled with words since Doctor Strange. It was really cool, it was really interesting, and I like that direction that they took. Non-Vision confronted White Vision with a question, said, why are you doing this? And he was like, well, I don't know about you, but I was sent here to get you. And he's like, I'm not even me. And then he was like, I gotta rethink everything. And then, obviously, Non-Vision touches his forehead and says, here's my memories. And then he shoots off in space, like I said before. But that itself, them having a conversation was so in character for, who Vision is. He's a very logical person. He'll deal with the situation and find a way to handle it with poise. He knows that logic will defeat brutality every time. And that's just such a perfect way to end that fight between those two. And I really love the way they approached it. And I really wish they sort of did that with Wanda and Agatha. But like I said, they didn't. And they did the big laser show, which is fine. It's fine. I think that they handled both fights the best way that they could, but they knew that they had to use the budget for one of these characters in some way or another. And if it had to be anyone, this was really just Wanda's story. It had to be Scarlet Witch. It had to be the introduction of Scarlet Witch, which is what I want to talk about now. This payoff of who Scarlet Witch is. Everyone's saying it's sort of an allusion to the Dark Phoenix saga, which they did really dirty in the Fox movies, but I think they did really well in this without calling it Dark Phoenix. And the way that the Scarlet Witch is some sort of entity that only one person can have and is sort of destined to have, and that being, her birthright, is so compelling. I hate how much I'm using the word compelling, but man, it's just so satisfying to finally see her don the Scarlet Witch garb in a non-cheesy way. It was so satisfying to see her with the funky little headpiece without it looking tacky or weird. It gave the whole weird cartoonish look some new meaning. It made it seem like it was something that wasn't of this earth, which gave it a lot more depth rather than her just saying, I just like it because I like the way it looks. Let's admit that's ridiculous. It doesn't even work in the comics. But in this show, they made it work. And man, I'm impressed. I'm impressed that they did that. The fact that we get to see a hint of what she can do, and the fact that Agatha was like, you are stronger than the Sorcerer Supreme. You just don't even know it yet. It is just so satisfying to see a character given the respect to her power that she deserves. Because we all knew she could have whooped Thanos' ass. I mean, he sent the whole armada raining down on her. And she came out with no scratches at all? I mean, she got beat down a little bit, yeah, but she came right back up. So they all knew that. They addressed it in the show. And the fact that they're finally saying, you are some badass shit. You don't even know it yet. And the fact that she just can do what Doctor Strange took an entire movie to do by the end of the show. It's just yeah, of course, you always had it in her. We always did. But now they're finally saying it and they're actually speaking it into reality. And it's just, it's so fulfilling. And I'm sure other comic book readers or other people who are invested in her character ever since she was introduced have been waiting for this moment. And it's fantastic. We finally get the name drop of Scarlet Witch. And I just love that. I love that. I love that they went all in. And it's weird, right? It's weird that it's harder for us to accept Scarlet Witch just being her name from the get-go, but we're all cool with Vision just cause. I always thought Vision was a much harder name to just be yeah, that's a normal name. He doesn't really, it's has nothing to do with Vision. It's obviously it's Ultron's Vision or whatever. You can get into that, but as a name, for me, it just never stuck. Especially White Vision. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. I just think the name White Vision it sounds racist for some reason. I don't know. There's a whole conversation I had with my buddies, but yeah, that's not the point. But anyways, the fact that we got Scarlet Witch in her garb, in her costume, in that awesome hairdo is just, man, it's great. It's great. Hey guys, while I'm actually in the middle of editing right now, it's going on pretty long. So sorry that I had a lot to say about WandaVision, but if you are enjoying it up to this point, thank you. But anyways, I forgot to mention some key things about the last episode, not the series overall, that kind of didn't work for me. And it's sort of those tropes that Marvel is known for at this point. And one of them is the Evan Peters reveal as just being a boner joke in the end. Haha, I didn't think it was quite funny. I thought it was just sort of a plunk kind of reveal, just oh, okay, that's a little disappointing. And not because I needed it to be tied to the X-Men, but I needed them to justify some reason why they cast Evan Peters, other than this is going to create conversation. I felt like it was sort of just Marvel saying, this is going to get people to watch, and that's all we need. And I felt sort of just a lazy choice to do, because you could pull anyone from the X-Men and then you could say, hey, let's put them in this movie as a completely different character, and that's all you need to do just to kind of create some interest. I'm just a little disappointed that they didn't try to tie things up a little bit better, but maybe they are. Maybe this is just one step into something that they're actually going to follow up on later. But for me, in this show, in this self-contained series, I don't think it really worked for me. But overall, I did enjoy Evan Peters. I love his performance. I love that actor. He's hilarious. But yeah, that choice just didn't work for me by the end. Also, the other thing that I didn't really like about the show was another thing that Marvel's known for, which is that sting at the end, that little tease, the something more. I like, Skrulls. I liked them in Captain Marvel. I thought they were the most interesting part of that entire movie, but that little sting at the end, I'm just yeah, of course they have to kind of plant the seed for the next thing that they're gonna do, and Photon's gonna go up and meet Nick Fury or whatever. I get that they have to do that, but I just kind of wish that they use that for just a little bit more of in addition to maybe what's going on with White Vision or something like that, some tease to that, because the show overall is about those characters. I don't really care about, the seeds that they're trying to plant for other shows. I just want these series to be about, them, because that's kind of the whole point. But, that's just me nitpicking, being a little bitch, so I'm sorry. But anyways, I wanted to mention those things because I know that people are going to be talking about them. So, yeah, back to me yesterday at like 2 in the morning. All right, see ya. The last point I wanted to talk about is when Wanda is going back into her past. I like that they tied the sitcoms back to her childhood, and that was sort of her comfort, and that's why she kind of relies on that in her reality, or her new reality that she created. I think that was a fantastic way of tying everything all together, and we got to see the Stark Industries missile crash into her house, and in an instant her family's wiped out, and all she has left is her brother. And by then we already knew the context of why she is going through so much hardship, but then just seeing it from the very start and knowing that this girl from the very get-go has had a hard life. It makes the journey so much more satisfying when we get to see all of this all come together. The fact that Wanda grew up on these shows and then her subconscious spit out this reality that was sort of her comfortable bubble that she could rely on just was a perfect way to show how she was wanting to heal. And I think that's the whole thing about the show. Like I said in the very beginning of this video, that this is a show about grief. This is a show about how we handle grief and what we're willing to do to just escape from that feeling. And in the end, I think they did a really great job. And I hate to give this a score, but I guess I have to for anyone watching. But this is just really just my thoughts just spilling out of my head without really any notes. So I'm sorry if it's going off and you're just like, where is this guy going? But I did love the show more than I disliked some parts of the show. I think overall this is a really special series, and I'm really glad that Marvel decided to say, hey, the weirdest concept show that we have, we're just going to open the gates with that one. I think that's a really brave thing. They could have done Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but they said, you know what? Let's do that show where they just do sitcoms for the first 2 episodes. Yeah, let's just do that. That's some big dick energy from Kevin Feige, and I really appreciate that. I give WandaVision an 8.5 out of 10, and that's just in the scope of all the Marvel movies, because I feel that if you don't have the context of all the other Marvel movies and what other shows are going to come out, then maybe you won't enjoy the show for what it is. Like, literally, if you just jump into the show without knowing any of that, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to like the acting, but that's pretty much it. You might like some of the set pieces and the homages to sitcoms, but you're not going to get much out of this. This is not your mom's show. This is not your dad's show. This is our show. Okay? So, in the scope of that, this is an 8.5 out of 10. So guys, that wraps up my thoughts on WandaVision. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I went on for a while, but I'm gonna really try to cut this down and try to make it concise. So thank you guys so much. And if you guys enjoyed this, remember to like the video now. Also remember to subscribe if you are not yet subscribed and you want to see more videos like this, or if you liked any of the other videos on my channel, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It's very easy. It's that big red button that says subscribe. So please do that, and let me know what you guys thought of WandaVision. Are you guys excited? Are you guys anticipating when she's gonna appear next in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? Because I am. And I will see you guys at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I might do another video like this, or I might do another video with other people. Who knows? So, thank you guys. And as always, I will see you later.